Hello, my name is Scott Hamilton. Welcome to the third half and another edition of On the Turntable, where we spend time getting to know the people behind the music. Today I'm joined by Bruce Soord, songwriter, producer and creative force behind The Pineapple Thief. When we talked last week, Bruce was sitting outside his camper van on the Isle of Purbeck, which somehow felt perfectly in tune with his music and his new solo album, Ghosts in the Park, reflective, atmospheric and full of memory, movement and quiet humanity. That sounds lovely, doesn't it? I don't know who wrote that, but Bruce.
No, I don't.
How are you? Welcome to the third half.
I'm all right. Yeah, I'm just getting everything packed up to do some shows, some live shows. So chaos, but I'm all right.
When did the album come out? Is the album out for? Is it a month?
2 weeks, just over 2 weeks.
2 weeks, and has it been a pretty hectic couple of weeks then of promos and talking to people and dashing about the country?
There have, yes. For some reason, we've decided to do these solo shows in the middle of releasing an album, and I've also got Pineapple Thief album that's being finished right now that we're delivering. So it's it's all, everything is happening.
Is that a bit of an insight already into the rather chaotic life of a musician doing multiple projects at the same time?
Well, this is the thing. The thing about the dynamics within a band is that there's audits. So basically, there's order. There's an order corner where everything is in its place, and that's basically the drums and the bass. Actually, all three of them and the keyboards. And then there's me, which is chaos. That I am the chaos guy, and it drives them up the wall because I'm just juggling everything, dropping things everywhere I go, and it drives them absolutely mad. But yes, so I am Mr. Chaos.
I think that's brilliant. Do you have moments of lads, like, right, stop, I've just thought up some new lyrics or a new melody or something like that, can we just feed it in? And
all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
they're called Bruce, we're releasing next week or something like that, or we've got
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Or like, we're just about to do a show. So, do you know what? Can we do this instead, or can we change that? And they're like, no. Yeah. But yeah, it's fine. That's all. It's all part of the fun.
Chaotic frontman syndrome, is it? There's
it is.
Something about that. So, but you did manage to get away for a few days last week for a bit of R&R, which again, like, that must be nice and it all, just to sort of recharge before you start to go off tour.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm really lucky. We live like 45 minutes from the Jurassic Coast, and it's absolutely beautiful. And so we just thought, like, we buy this camper van because especially with the studio being here in my home, well, it's in the garden where I am now, sat in my little room. You can't get away from it.
Yeah.
So even if you have a day off at home, it's still there. It's still like talking to you. You can hear it whispering to you, Bruce, come into the studio. There's stuff you need to do. Whereas when you're in a field,
there's nothing you can do.
That's it. You have to switch off.
Even to the extent last week where you were saying, Scott, it's nice to talk, but my battery's just about to go on my mobile phone. So it's properly low-tech stuff.
It was, yes.
So listen, why don't you spend couple of minutes just introducing you and your music and a bit of the kind of backstory for you here for people who have never heard you or never heard anything from The Pineapple Thief or Bruce Soord before. Yeah,
backstory, blimey. So, I started doing it in 1999 as a little solo thing. I thought, let's just see. I always liked to write songs, and I played in the bands before that we tried. In the old days, in sort of late 90s, the way to in the music business was to play a gig, and all the A&R people turn up, and you sign a £1 million record deal on a bonnet of a car or whatever. And of course, I did that, and I played all these shows in Camden, in London, and nothing happened. And I was quite disillusioned, so I thought, sod this, I'm not going to chase it anymore. I'm just going to write some music and just do what I want. And funnily enough, that's when things started to sort of happen. When I stopped chasing it, then things happened. And I released albums for years, and then eventually people said, "Oh, Bruce, we like this. Can you come and play my little festival?" And I thought, "Oh, right, okay, I'll better get a band together." And I guess 25 years later, there's been this trajectory of sort of slow. We started at the bottom and worked our way slowly upwards. I guess things really changed 10 years ago when our drummer Gavin Harrison joined, and we did this album, Your Wilderness, which then all of a sudden we just went from here to here. And that's when I gave up the day job. So before that, I was getting my high-vis jacket on, cycling to the office, coming back at night and doing the music. So yeah, that's the backstory. And so I have my main band, the Pineapple Thief, but I've also been doing the solo stuff, which is the album that we're probably talking about here. I guess because originally the Pineapple Thief was me solo. Really, I played everything. But then the last sort of 10 years, Pineapple Thief has become a band, and it's collaborative, proper like old school sort of 70s style. Everybody gets together and we write together and we perform and produce together. So I'm kind of thinking, well, I quite miss the way of just the solitary sort of way of writing and performing. So that's why I do both. That's why I've got the solo thing coming out.
So that's quite interesting, actually, just going back to that, like that kind of almost stereotypical view of, you've got to keep doing gig after gig after gig after gig, and then happenstance kicks in and somebody will, I like that kind of image of signing a record deal on the bonnet of a
yeah.
I was going to say Ford Cortina, but maybe that's showing that I'm probably about 10 years older than you.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. Yeah. Ford Focus.
Ford Focus, smaller bonnet, bigger contract.
Yeah.
And then going through this, actually, coming back to recording and writing and then letting people come to you. Do you think that's unique? Because I would have thought it would have been more of the former, gig and get signed or not.
The people I know that because now I'm in the industry, so it's a really small bubble actually. It's quite interesting when you actually get inside the industry. And everybody I know, that's how they've done it. A lot of people, they had that big deal. They had that album one that was a smash. And then quite a lot of them, they started up the top and then they kind of taken this sort of, which I'd certainly prefer starting at the bottom and going up with each record. And I think actually I was talking to my bass player, John, and we said, do you know anyone else that has done it the way we've done it? 25 years on, and you're actually still getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And, I don't think there are. I don't think there's that many bands that have done it this way. And I think that it's quite unique that I was releasing records. It was a very, very small independent record label. And we were selling 3,000, 4,000 copies of CDs, which, is fine, but you're not going to make a living out of that. It's not, it's not life changing. But, and that was it. That was the base that we needed. And if for some reason people kept on buying it and each release just kept going up. And I think, you're right. I don't think there is a sort of case like this. I mean, we've done the album we've just finished now is the 15th studio album.
Right.
So it's been quite a long process.
And do you think? So again, just thinking about that, and I'm way off script now, but and this is why I love doing this. But if you have that one big record, right? Going back to if that gig sign big record, whoa, and it's what people always say, isn't it? The second album's like the more difficult one.
Yeah.
Do you think you're always trying to recreate that first album, whereas if you do that kind of like growing up into it, the music evolves more? Because I'm always interested in this when you've been doing it for 25 years and you've done a dozen, 15, 20 albums. The music matures and evolves as opposed to trying to recreate the last one.
I think there's no pressure, is there? And there's people I know, I won't name any names, but there's people I know that, when he was 17, they was flown over they had this big record, and then the second record, they were flown over to LA. And, I just think that if that happened with us, we would have been the same. We would have just had that big record, big production. In those days, and especially in the late 90s, early noughties, you still had MTV, you had big record labels that would pick. It's almost like they would curate what was going to be the scene, because the record labels had the power. So you would say, right, I'm going to sign you and we're going to put you in this recording studio with this amazing producer, and it would create a good record, and it would go everywhere, And whereas now, I think that we don't have that model anymore. It's very much more people make music and the public decides what they're going to listen to. There's very much, we don't have MTV dictating what people are listening to anymore, which is quite interesting.
And how does that influence like your writing as well? Because do you write? Do you feel you write for an audience, or? And I want to come on and talk about Ghosts in the Park here, because when I listened to it, there was a lot of emotion there flowing through it, you know. And I think I think I was in the gym when I was listening to it.
Right.
And can I just say to you, it's not gym-inspiring music, and that's not a bad. I think I packed up and went home, and the wife said, "I thought you were at a gym," and I said, "Yeah, but I've just got to come home and finish listening to this record because it's not inspiring me to throw kettlebells around."
No.
But my question was, do you write for an audience, or do you write in the moment, like a mood or an event that's actually inspiring you?
I can answer that, because I actually had that same thought, that when I was writing the solo record, I honestly wasn't thinking about it becoming a record. I wasn't actually thinking, oh, one day people are going to be listening to this. It didn't cross my mind until at the end, when we were putting it together, and the label was saying, right, we need some titles and blah, 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 blah. I was going, oh my goodness, yeah, this is a record that people are going to actually hear and listen to. So yeah, I think the only reason that I can do that is because I'm old. I've been doing it for a long time. And in the early days, I remember, you're really, really desperate for, you want to sell loads of records, and you're thinking, why am I selling records? And then you are thinking about it. You're thinking about, what do people want to hear? And obviously, that's not the right way to go about it. The purest way is to just write the music that you want to write, which is what I do now. It has taken me a while to get to that point, that mental point where I don't actually consider the fact that it's actually going to be released, and I think that's probably why it's so, personal. The songs are so personal, and people say, well, Bruce, why are you sharing all these like raw emotions with people that you don't know? And I say, I have no idea. I couldn't answer that question. So I think that's the reason why I didn't ever consider people ever listening to this is it enabled me to actually write the record as it is.
Yeah, interesting. And there's a lot of movement and locations in it. Hotels, traveling, anonymous spaces, and stuff. So, what was the kind of design point thinking like that, or was that a kind of naturally organic thing that you found yourself in particular spaces, emotion, write, log, move on, and then put it back together? Talk me through the kind of organic nature of the album. Yeah,
so I've been going through, this process of end of life with your parents. That is nothing very exceptional about that, unfortunately. It's just part of, being a human. And so that was always going to inform what I was going to write about. So there was already this theme, this concept, I guess, And then when I was going away for a tour with the Pineapple Thief, and I had the sort of the ingredients for the record, but it hadn't really formed itself. And I knew that we'd have so much downtime on tour. I was on my own in hotel rooms, or even on show days. You go to the venue at 10, and the crew say, Bruce, just leave us to it. Come back at 5 o'clock for sound check, and you're like, oh, okay. Right, what do I do now? And so even on those days, I remember the title track, Ghost in the Park. I was in Oberhausen, and I just walked down to this park called the Kaisergarten, and that's why it's called Ghost in the Park. And I sat in this park all day, just watching people go past, and all the thoughts that it would bring, children, young married couples pushing prams, old people holding hands. So all those emotions that it brings you when you look at this. So I was writing these words, and then the next day we'd have a day off, and you'd be in this hotel room, and it's quite unique because you're in this nondescript hotel room in a very nondescript suburban area normally, and you just think, what do I do with this? I'm completely, isolated. I'm away from my family. I'm thousands of miles away from my studio, my family, all the distractions. I'm here in the silence of this hotel room. I thought, that's perfect. Let's use that. Let's write some stuff. Let's see what happens. And I had this rule, because it's quite a common thing when people go on tour and say, yeah, I'm going to write loads of songs. And it never happens. You don't do it. You just, you go down the pub instead. But this time I basically said, no, every day you're going to write, even if you think that when you pick the guitar up, you think, oh, this isn't good enough. Because there's always this like, is this good enough? Is this got the magic? Is this the best riff? Is this the best melody you've ever come up with? There's always that kind of pressure. And so I always end up going, no, that's not good enough. And I put it and try again tomorrow. Whereas this time I didn't do that. Every day I'd started something and I'd finish. I'd go as late as I could. I'd always have a few beers on the go. I'll be honest about that. So by the end of the night, quite often, I was like, oh God, because you find yourself taking a swig out you can, and before you know it, oh my goodness, I'm a little bit tipsy, and I just go straight to bed. And I wake up and I'd see the guitar and the laptop, and I go, oh yeah, what was I doing last night? I put my headphones on. I go, oh yeah, that's actually all right. Where's this going? So then I'd carry that up to the next day, and the next day, and the next day off, and the next town, and I think that's really where the essence of the album, that's where it all came from. So when they talk about born in hotel rooms and all that stuff, it's actually true. It's not some gimmicky marketing thing. Yeah.
I love that. I love the idea of Bruce waking up in the morning and there's the half a can of lager, half-eaten kebab, guitar there. That's it. Actually, those notes, those lyrics look quite good. That melody that I recorded on the phone last night at 2:30, that seems quite good.
Exactly that.
But see this observational thing, and I'd like to go back to that, because actually when I had a conversation with Peter Sandberg, which we recorded last month, and his album Temporary Coexistence of Humans was amazing, and he was talking about being on the tube, being on the Underground in London, and watching a girl with her headphones on who had been crying, and he was kind of like, wow, what's going through this person's head at the moment, and what has made her cry? Should I go up to her and speak to her? So this kind of observational thing about life, and it's just interesting that you again have struck on that about being in the park and watching young families and young couples. So you've got all this incoming emotion with your family, and then you've got all this observational stuff, and trying to blend all that together into good music must be, quite a challenge, but quite an inspiring thing as well.
Yeah, it is. And I always think, what on earth is it that you do when you pick a guitar up or whatever is your instrument, and you start to write a song from nothing? It's not from nothing, because you've had these observations and these experiences. And you think, well, what is it what happens when you pick up this guitar and you sort of think, right, okay, I've got these feelings, got these emotions. You look at your guitar, you start to play some notes, and then gradually this thing happens. And for me, the best stuff happens when you're not really thinking about anything. You're almost in this kind of trance where you're daydreaming, and all of a sudden words and melodies come out. That's what I love about being a songwriter, is you can't describe it. You can't describe where it comes from or how it happens, and when it works, there's no formula. You can't say, oh, this is how I do it. This is how I write a song. There is no formula. It just happens, or it doesn't happen. And I think the environment, like you said, the environment that I was in, like you said, all the experiences, the inputs that I was getting, it did help. That created a unique environment.
So let me just quote a line to you, and you can tell me who wrote this line. Life continues to move while everything else appears to stop. Yeah. That's a lovely line, isn't it? And that reflective moment, that's one of your lines, Bruce, just in case you
yeah. So
just this feels like is it, remember, was it Pop Quiz in the 80s or something like that? Or never mind the Buzzcocks. People are quoting. Did I write that? That's it. And if you didn't write it, then you can use it on the next album. But
yes, exactly. Thank you. But that's the thing, and I think one of the things I find, I mean, if we're talking about grief here and loss of people that you love, is that when you wake up the day, after someone has departed that you've always had in your life, you the world does seem to stand still. You look at things. I remember I would be on a hospital ward, actually, for the last days of when my dad was alive. And you would look down at this roundabout, and you'd look down at this town that I've lived in all my life, and you see these cars going around and people going about their business, and then it kind of feels really surreal. You look at it and you think, God, the world is moving, but it's not moving for me. The world is sort of standing very still at the moment, and so it's very, very it's a very, like, people know, who everybody has to go through this, and they know what it's like.
No, and listen, I it's interesting talking to you about it. I mean, my parents are, really getting on now and stuff like that. And it's a tough phase, but, I think that kind of moment, being quite philosophical about it. And I think you said 5-10 minutes ago, everybody goes through it at some point. Some people are fortunate that it happens later in life and they have kind of like happier endings, and some not. But
Yeah.
it's just part of that kind of life, the evolution and rich tapestry, as you were. But did writing about it help you capture moments? Was that again part of the inspiration? Like, I want to capture something, I want to remember, and whether it's in the album or just otherwise, I'm sure you, like a lot of musicians, you've probably got lyrics everywhere and music everywhere that may or may never see vinyl at the end of the day. And is that a
Yeah.
process of almost, I'm spitballing here, and please close me down if you don't want to go into this, a bit of kind of like holding on to some memories that otherwise would potentially disappear?
Completely. And I think that there's obviously there's a track on the record called "Meet Me on the Downs," which is purely about memories. And the second half is about memories, because when I came back shortly after my dad passed away, you kind of think, well, that last 5-10 years of his life was weird. He wasn't really my father. He was slowly being lost to dementia. And then I thought, well, that's not how I want to remember my dad. So I shut my eyes and I went as far back in my life as I could, trying to remember these memories. And the ones that popped up were all the things like going for walks when I was like 6, 7 with my dog and my dad and my mum. And we go to the Downs. That's why it's called Meet Me on the Downs. Mm. And then I've remembered my granddad, when he was dying, and he would take me to see the trains and he would hold my hand. So I wrote down all these things. And the second half of the song is literally just reading out these memories. And there's another song on there called You Made a Promise. Mm. And again, it's strange that I would write about these things, because but I did make a deal with myself. I said, look, this you're either gonna write just about everything totally raw, and put your whole self out there, or no, don't bother. It's almost like an all or nothing moment. And I remember that my father, towards the end of his life, he got really upset and worried because my mum has Alzheimer's, and he was caring for her, and he was like, who's going to look after mum? Who's going to look after mum? And he'd be really upset. And I said, don't worry, Dad. You got me and you got my sister. We will make sure she's okay. And so my mum was in a nursing home now, because she doesn't know where she is or who anybody is, and so I would go visit her, and she would just walk past me. She wouldn't look at me, and I was in the studio, and I said to my sister, I'm not sure what's the point in us even going, because she doesn't know who I am. It's so depressing. And I sent her this message, and I kind of just sat back in my studio sofa, and I sort of fell asleep as I do in the afternoon, for like 20 minutes. And I woke up and I saw my phone, and my sister had sent me a message, and she said, oh my God, I went to see Mum. And she said, she just looked at me and smiled and said, hello, Rachel, how are you? She's never said anything. She's been non-verbal for years and years. So she had this moment of clarity, which you hear about. Yeah. You hear that people have this. And I went, oh my God, I made my father a promise. And, and for some reason, I just picked up my guitar and wrote the song, because I was filled. I had this sheer sort of, I guess, guilt and a bit of shame and kind of a little bit of a horror that is, oh my God, maybe she does know who I am all this time. And so, again, that's a long story, but that's what that song was about. And so I picked up my guitar, because I was in such a sort of extreme sort of state of emotion from reading that. It was like, oh my God. And straight away I just had to make a song. Maybe that's part of the way of dealing with it, of dealing with those situations.
I can feel my chest tightening here as I'm listening to you talk about that, honestly.
Sorry.
I'm like, right, I don't know where to go next. Do you ask about Bath at the weekend, or what brand of lager do you drink when you're on tour? Yeah. But I think that's lovely, and kind of on a serious point, I suspect I know the answer to this, but in different set of circumstances. But would you have written emotionally like that 20 years ago, or were you kind of chasing things to write about, or emotional things, as opposed to now with age you're becoming maybe more honest in your
Yeah,
creativity and your music and your lyrics? Yeah.
yeah. I think that's a really good point, because one of the struggles in the early days, I was always writing melancholic stuff, but I hadn't lived the life that I've lived now. That's the thing. So you're right. So there's plenty. I look back on songs. I'm not going to quote any, but there are
Oh, go
certain
on,
songs where you
quote,
look at. Hmm?
quote. Go on, quote. Give me your most melancholic line about cycling to work with your high-vis vest.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, there's one song. I just, I remember "Someone Pull Me Out of Here." Was because I remember in my early days I would suffer from the worst hangovers ever, but I'd still drink, and I would end up going to work and I would be so sick, and so literally I'd be singing songs about that. It's like, oh, but actually the words sound really, really quite meaningful. But actually, you know what I'm singing about? I'm singing about my stupid hangover that I got when I was like 20. So whereas now, you can't. You kind of I brought up a family. I've got 19-year-old twin boys. I've got a 7-year-old girl. They're always amazing things for inspiration. I've been married for 26 years, 24 or whatever. We this album. Obviously just lost my father, and my mother's now in a nursing home. So all that kind of stuff is just is deep life stuff
Yeah.
that you can share, basically. Yeah, and so it certainly made the songwriting definitely more honest. Yeah.
So and I think, I mean, I don't know if I said to you last week, I still go and see a lot of gigs, right? And I go and see a lot of new bands. I go and see a lot of old bands that I used to like back in the day. And a lot of them are still playing the stuff that they released back in the day. I mean, there's only so many. It's like everybody's doing 40th anniversary albums, like the
They are,
Mission
yeah.
40th anniversary of God's Own Medicine, coming to you
Yeah.
soon. Which is fine, and I like all that stuff. But you probably you do a bit of that, but then there's a very different place here, and I do love this kind of thing. I've lived a life, and therefore I'm writing about very different things now, because there's a pattern to it, and because they're real, and the emotion comes through. But when I was listening to the album, and forgive me here, you might absolutely hate this, but again, this might be just showing my kind of like of music. I kind of was getting touches of a lot of different things coming together, like the Dream Academy, Blue Nile. I was getting little bits of Paddy McAloon from Prefab Sprout coming
Oh,
through
really?
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
I loved it. But there was a constant, kind of like emotion and theme and sound to it as well. And do you think that your music has become more complex as you've evolved, as well as the actual content itself?
I think uh, the one thing that I would take from the evolution is that I can do things in a kind of more stripped back, almost like a simpler way. There's a simple path to getting to that kind of emotional connection. So with this record, it's fairly sparse. It's very acoustic. And I think in the early days, I would have thought, no, I need to start layering things up. I need to start making things a lot more, just working almost too hard on a song. Whereas I think now, over the years, my voice has got stronger just because I've been singing for so long. In the early days, my voice wasn't. I didn't really appreciate that my voice was an instrument. It was almost like a necessity that I'm a singer-songwriter, really a guitarist, but I'm going to have to sing because these are my songs. And whereas now, the voice and the guitar, I feel like I can say and do what I need to do in a very much more stripped back, simple way. I think is the only way to describe it.
And is that because I talk about this a lot in the third half? We talk about sustainability, we talk about modern life, we talk about, the advancement of technology and how all these things influence us. Is the stripped back thing either a conscious or possibly even a subconscious kind of reflection? Actually, there's too much noise. Let's create space. Let's create air gaps. Let's create thinking times. I'm trying not to lead the witness here, but almost like the kind of anti-AI, anti-everything kind of closing in on us from all different angles.
Funny, yeah, because this is the other thing that I'm really lucky as I've got older and as relatively more successful, is that I've just got some really lovely acoustic guitars, and I've got some really nice mics, and I realised that actually that's all I needed, and I sat down and I played and I just played the guitar and I sang. In my computer behind me is an infinite array of stuff. I could basically get anything that's ever been used in any studio, any instrument, any piece of gear, and I could probably load it up, quite easily. And you could easily get lost in that kind of approach. And so it's almost like the anti that. I did actually start off thinking, no, I'm only going to have acoustic guitar and vocal on this, but it kind of did. In the end, I kind of thought, no, I don't need to constrain myself, unnecessarily. So, but yeah, and I think that as a performer and a songwriter, if you can get away with it, that anti-AI, that anti sort of, then you're just a better. I think because I'm a better songwriter and a better performer than I was 10, 20 years ago, then it naturally lends itself to being able to do that, to do it really, really, really in a sort of really sort of stripped down way.
But if you think back or look back, and actually look for new bands coming out today and stuff like that, do you think they have it? I kind of sometimes, I'm not sure I buy it. Oh, it's harder these days, and harder for kids these days than what it was, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Well, actually, go back far enough, you'll find there was wars and everything else, and poverty and famine. And
yeah.
But do you think it's harder for bands starting out these days, or do you still see some really good bands coming through and you think, yeah, you know what, they've got it?
It's not so many. And because I do mix in my spare time, I do mix other bands, and you can hear them. They try, they put so much work in, but you kind of think. I kind of always wondered the art of the songwriter, and the art of the hook and the art of the melody. And you listen to these things and you think, do you really think that hook is good enough? Do you think that what you've done there is because it's. To me, it's not. It's okay, but because there's so much that I don't know if there's those stats of how many tracks get uploaded to Spotify every day. It's scary. Well, how are you supposed to get found? How are you supposed to poke your head up above the noise to actually to make? So in that sense, it is incredibly hard. I mean, this is a bit like in the old days. You had to get a record deal. Now, to poke your head above the parapet, you've either got to just get lucky, get the viral, get something featured on some YouTuber just uses your song for some reason or whatever, and then you make it, maybe briefly, or you're so good that you just can't, that you can't not be noticed. I don't know if there's been any examples, of that, where people have just exploded without the need of any kind of hype or record label or anything like that. But yeah, people ask me advice all the time. Bruce, what do I do? Because they see me as someone who's, kind of broken through. And I say, you know what? I have no idea. I don't know. All I can say is just do what I did and just don't give up. Don't stop. Do it because you love it, and keep going. Don't think, oh my goodness, I need to make it, or why aren't I famous, or why haven't I got more streams? If you start thinking like that, then you're already on your way up, I think.
Remind me never to come and ask you for advice, Bruce, if it's going to be Scott, I'm sorry, I don't know. Yeah. the worst coach ever. You're not selling yourself.
So I don't know. You're on your own, I'm afraid. Go
and have a kebab and a can of beer and sit in a hotel room. I keep saying kebab. You didn't say kebab. I don't know what I'm saying about myself here, but other fast foods available at 2:00 in the morning, allegedly. But I I also think there's two things that spring to mind when I do think about this. One is, and we talk about this a lot, instant gratification. I think now people, it's that 15 minutes of let's go on some talent show and, I'll be really successful. And also I think this striving for perfection. And I don't know whether perfection's a great thing. And that's why I love live. I love live music. I love live sport. Because in theatre, my wife's a drama teacher and we go and see a lot of theatre. You never know what's going to happen. And I know this might sound dreadful for you as a musician, but you could break a string, like a plug could fall out, you could trip over your shoelace. And I love the kind of jeopardy of live. Whereas I think a lot of new bands and new people that come through, I want everything to be perfect. And life's not like that.
No, and to be honest, we've suffered from the same affliction, really. Of the technology you've got means that you can make it perfect.
Yeah.
In the 70s, when you're sat in a room and you've got a tape machine going around, you don't get that perfection, but it still sounds good to me. All those bands that did it. And you say about jeopardy, live. Certainly, with the solo stuff, there's an awful lot of jeopardy with this because we got looper pedals, and the last show we did, we were playing, and I've got a couple of guitars with different open tunings, and I forgot to change the guitar, so I came in with this line, and it was all kinds of wrong, the most awful notes you've ever heard, and I just stopped and I said, "Oops, I've got the wrong guitar." The whole audience laughed. I picked up the guitar, plugged it in. Right, we're going to carry on from where we left off, but this time with the right guitar. And it was, it was all part of the show. People said, "I love that. I love the fact that you did that, but you were able to carry on." And it was like a moment that you can share. And there's nothing wrong, There's nothing wrong. Obviously, if you do that all night, there's a point where, But I think that was, that was. You've definitely got a point.
I love that. I just that's brilliant. If you do it 2 or 3 times, it's not a good habit to form, is it? Really?
No.
And right, ladies and gentlemen, can you just wind back a couple of minutes to that really deep emotional point I had you in?
Yeah, exactly.
Tinderhooks,
yes.
Let's wind back there.
Yeah, there's definitely a balance to be had. Yeah.
Okay, I love talking to you. I want to talk to you a little bit outside the music, and I've probably had a little bit of insight to this already. But what makes you feel calm, and how do you kind of really unwind? Is it with the 7-year-old, the twins, or is it with the wife, or is it just kind of actually I'm just going to go and sit in a field somewhere?
Bit of all of those, I think. Going for, I think it just in the old age, we just really enjoy just going for walks, because I live in this beautiful area of southwest England, and like touched on before, that's why we got the camper van. We just say to my wife, like, where can we go this weekend? Let's find a field, pay whatever it is, hardly anything, just to set up, and you just stare at the horizon and just take a bit of stillness, and I'm quite lucky now that I'm full-time, and I've been full-time musician and mixing engineer or whatever for 11 years. So I can actually, at 6 o'clock or whatever time I finish, I lock the door and that's it. And I can actually stop. So I go into the house and I just cook the dinner. And we kind of always laugh with my kids, because they're like, "Dad, why do we eat 8, 9 o'clock?" Well, we're on Mediterranean time here, because, I just open a beer or have a glass of wine and I just cook, at least listen to some music. And then we all eat late. So the whole evening is kind of a social thing.
Yeah.
So all that kind of stuff. I think I've learned how to get a better balance of I think also it helps when you kind of figure out what life is all about. For me personally, I kind of figured that out, that you kind of get over the fact that we've got this hideous issue where we're mortal, and that life does end. How do you deal with that? I kind of as soon as I was at peace with that, then I could, that was a big part of being able to kind of have that Zen view of life. Yeah.
And do you do anything else creatively? Do you do you grow vegetables? Do you make cheese? We talk a lot about cheese on the show. We're a big cheese
Yes, no, I do grow. I'm terrible. But so I'm looking at my chili plants right now that I'm growing here, and I've got some tomatoes. So every day you're like, oh look, there's a little tomato growing. All those simple things.
And when you were in Purbeck last week, did you turn around to the wife and say, "I hope my tomatoes are okay"?
Yeah. Oh, it's so hot. Who's going to water them? They'd be yeah.
That sounds like me. I've got some lettuce growing at the bottom of the garden. And like, I got up in the morning and walked down at the bottom of the garden, and the wife's always saying, "I don't think they'll have grown that much since 10 o'clock last night." And even if they had, like, so what? We're going to get eaten at some point. Final kind of couple of questions here. I suspect the idea of success and what success looks like has changed a lot over the years as well. You seem very comfortable in you and yourself at the moment and what you're writing. So what still excites you about making music, and how has that success or outlook on success changed more recently?
Yeah, it's a good question. Me and John always have this conversation. We as the gigs got bigger, we would always go off stage and say, "Bruce, have we made it yet? Have we made it?" I go, "Well, I guess we have. We're playing. The last show we did was nearly 2,000 people, and we're doing these tours around North America and tour buses and stuff. If you were like 14-year-old self saying, well, that's what you're going to be doing when you're like in your 50s, you go, yes, that's it, brilliant. So I think in terms of success, I think we always say to each other, this is great. If we get more, fine. If we don't, then we're just so happy with what we've achieved. So I think that burden of chasing success is gone completely, So what we get enjoyment out of now is the feeling of when you've written a good song. When you've written a good song and you think, oh my God, that's it. This has got it. This has got that thing that we call it the magic. It's that thing. And that's when I get really excited, and I go to bed and I'm like, yeah. Oh, that song. I can't wait to get back in the studio and carry on working on it. And that's you can't get a better feeling than that. And then when you play live and you see the connection you get with the audience, sometimes that's quite, it's very, very special. So as long as if that continues, then the luckiest person on earth. Really, it's just that's more than enough.
I get that from my karaoke singing, as long as I get a reaction from the audience, I'm very fine with it.
I bet you do, yeah.
Elvis in Vegas, clearly not comeback tour, but hey, I just see a movie in the making here. I see a Richard Curtis film. You and John sitting on a hill or in a pub at the end of the night saying, "John, have we made it?" And that's it. And then the credits begin to roll.
Yeah.
Have we made it, John?
Yeah.
Who would play you? Oh, go on. Here's a question: who would play you and John in the Richard Curtis movie about your life and music?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Everybody's always gets me muddled up, you see. So people come up to me and think that I'm Alex James out of Blur, but he's not a actor, is he? Or Brian Cox, the scientist. Oh
yeah, you do look a bit like Brian Cox, actually.
Yeah, so maybe he'd have to play me. Yeah.
Brian. Should we just go on to Brian now and say, Brian, there's a new gig for you here, give up any of that other stuff. You're now playing Bruce Soord in the Richard Curtis movie.
Yeah, quantum mechanics and astrophysics stuff, we got a part for you.
Boring. Okay, plug. Where can people find out more about the album and the tour and what you're doing next?
So I think brucesoord.com. It's a terrible website, but on there you got all the links to everything, and just find me on all the streaming places, and just not in the gym.
Not in the gym.
But, yeah.
I know. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not gym music.
But if you fancy just relaxing and joining me with my sharing what it is to be human from my perspective, then
Bruce,
Come on.
it's a beautiful album. I loved it. You know, as I say, I went back. I literally, I'm not joking. I did come back from the gym and I sat and listened to it with my headphones on, you know, 2 or 3 times and kept going back and flicking. So I love it. I'm hoping, I haven't bought tickets yet, but I'm hoping to come and see you on tour sometime soon. Thank you very much for joining us on the third half today and being open about your journey, your life, and everything outside of music as well. It's been lovely chatting to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
This sight barely changed, just as shadows cast over our remains, with the wounded leaves still clinging on for dear life.